Well, I would like to officially welcome everyone to today's webinar. My name is Joan Devine. I'm the Director of Education with Pioneer Network, and you are here to participate in dementia competencies and how to choose good education. I'll share just a few logistics, although I think after the last couple of years, we're all pretty savvy for how Zoom works. But just so you know, all webinar attendees except for presenters are muted to minimize the possibility of background noise. But that said, we do absolutely want to hear from you. So we encourage you to use either the chat box or the Q&A. And actually the chat tends to work better because we all get to see it and it flows pretty well, but we'll keep an eye on both. And some questions in the chat may be held till the end, but we promise we'll be watching it and addressing the things that you put in there. You will receive a link to the webinar recording and handouts along with a certificate of attendance approximately 24 hours after the webinar ends. And for those of you who are seeking nursing home administrator CEs, the record of your time in the Zoom session serves as your sign-in sheet. So there's nothing more you need to do. If you did not provide your license number, state of issue, and NAB number when you registered, please be sure to send that to me and I'll pop my email address in the chat so that you'll have that, and you'll get that a couple more times between now and the next 24 hours. And so now, if you can give me the next slide, Kim, I would love to welcome the speakers for today's webinar, both very good friends of Pioneer Network. The first of them is our dear friend, Jennifer Kraft Morgan. And along with her here today is Kim McCrae, who I think many of you know and we've come to love personally and as a Pioneer Network friend. So that being said, I'm going to turn it over to you and I look forward to an hour of learning.
Welcome, everyone. We're going to start with what we need to start with, which is the learning objectives, right? Why are you here today? You're here today to get a sense of basic competency areas around direct care worker training, which really means training for everybody who deals with people living with dementia, how to choose a high quality education that's person-centered, how to reinforce that learning in different ways, and how to have strategies to improve the training and education related to dementia. So this all started with the GARD, the Georgia Alzheimer's and Related Dementias Collaborative. In 2013, there was a state plan put in place. It was updated in 2021. And this came out of the Georgia Alzheimer's and Related Dementias work group on workforce development that I have chaired and Kim has been on since the very beginning. We do different projects, but this is one of our favorite projects that we were able to do so far, to pull together competencies and to understand how you can pick good dementia education. And so our purpose today is really twofold. We really want to give you some criteria by which to judge dementia education for your staff, and to talk about what kinds of training to avoid, or even no matter the training, what kind of supports you can encourage and you can develop to encourage a deep applied learning in your organization instead of this sort of surface learning that we often find ourselves with. So this is the beautiful cover of the guide. It's freely available. It's on PDF. It's at this URL that's on the screen. But this competency guide aims to help employers and educators of direct care workers and others, as we said, to identify these strategies to improve the work environment and to identify good, high quality dementia education that supports quality of care, but also quality of life for people living with dementia. So we do want to acknowledge the hard work of the Direct Care Worker Competencies subcommittee of the GARD Workforce Development work group and all of the people who helped us in the process of developing the guide. And we'll talk a little bit more about that development when we get later in the webinar. So why do we need guides? Why is this an important thing to talk about? Why did we spend, what was it, 2 years of our lives, Kim, putting it together? There's a growing need for competent and committed direct care workforce that can deliver quality and comprehensive person-centered care, right? We all know that there are a lot of good, well-meaning people in long-term care, in senior support services, but they don't necessarily have the training that they need to really support high quality of care and high quality of life for people living with dementia. So we really need to improve the education at the initial education, but also the ongoing education, the continuing education for this workforce. And it has to be not just knowledge, but using the knowledge to create the skills and the attitudes and the behaviors that really support what we need to support and become a dementia capable, culturally competent workforce. And so it's really important to pick high quality training, to build high quality training, to use adult learning principles and foster organizational cultures that support that learning. And we're going to talk about all of these things today. I'm going to hand it over to you, dear.
And what we know, some more of the why, is because not all dementia education is created equally. And that's really important. And that's not something that we really hear people talking about a lot. So we really want to bring that to the forefront. And also, we know that the way that we're approaching dementia care in this country just doesn't work well. And we're looking at people with dementia as if they're patients and not people. We're looking at them from the standpoint of loss and deficits, and all of that creates stigma and makes stigma worse. It reduces people living with dementia, it reduces their well-being and causes excess disability. And it's just key that we acknowledge that together. And it's harmful for the people who are living with dementia if they don't have the people who are working with them don't have the correct education and competencies. It's irresponsible for us to put the direct care workforce into those positions when they don't know how to handle it. It's really, I'm saying it's just wrong, sinful, if we don't have everybody prepared correctly. Hold on one second. So what else are we seeing in the current training? If we're looking at the current training that's out there, what does a lot of it have, if we're being truthful and honest? Dementia and Alzheimer's are used interchangeably as if they mean the same thing. And they actually have very different meanings. And 90% or more of the population is really mistaken about this. It causes a lot of confusion. So it's important to not use Alzheimer's as the general term that causes so much confusion, and it can actually keep, and we know that it does, keeps people from getting an accurate diagnosis about the other types of dementia that they may really have. So it also, for people who don't have Alzheimer's, it makes them feel marginalized and ignored when people just say Alzheimer's instead of dementia. Plus, when we say Alzheimer's instead of dementia or Alzheimer-related dementias, that's scientifically incorrect. The words and the language that are used in education is so important. It matters, just like we were just talking about. We hear in some of the dementia education that's out there, the condition is described as a dementing illness or an affliction. And we hear people being described as demented and victims and sufferers in some of the education. And we know our friends with dementia tell us that words like that make them want to curl up and die. That's a literal quote. So describing people with dementia like that is totally unacceptable, but it doesn't have to be this way.
So the objectives of the guide are to help educators and employer choose high quality education that is person-centered. It's to reinforce the ways that we learn and support improved practice and thinking about education embedded in work and embedded in practice, and improve training and education related to dementia, including Alzheimer's disease, so that we can meet the needs of dementia-capable and create a culturally competent workforce too. And that's a really important aspect of it all. So what are we talking about when we talk about competencies? Competencies, there's a competency area, which is the broad area that sets the boundaries of a competency set. That describes the knowledge, the skills or abilities for effective work performance, effective engagement with a person living with dementia, effective communication. And so it's about the application and the observed application of that skill, of that attitude, of that knowledge, not just, can you take a test and you get the right answers? No, if you interact with somebody living with dementia, can you effectively communicate? Can you empathize? Can you understand the behavioral expressions as things that you can address? And can you creatively problem solve in order to be able to meet the needs of people living with dementia? And so it's really important that we think about this from a competency framework so that we can both identify the kinds of training that helps us get to that place, but also so that we can actually measure whether or not it happens. So whether or not effective communication happens, it needs to be observable and measurable in a skill, in something that can be actually demonstrated by a worker. And this makes it more objective and also helps us to make sure that what we're teaching is what they're learning and what they're applying. And oftentimes we don't follow that train all the way through. We do a nice webinar, we do a nice training, we're very didactic, which means very lecture-based, and then we don't actually observe any of what happens after the training and the constraints in the environment that keep things from happening, or the supports that allow things to happen the way that we need them to happen. So it describes that acquisition of the knowledge, of the skills and the abilities that contribute to effective performance. And it's important not only to provide that knowledge, but help people develop the competencies that are necessary that help to let them apply what they know and to continuously get better. Learning isn't a one-time thing, it's a lifelong thing, and it's an in-practice thing. And we know that as people work with people living with dementia, they get better. And over time, that accrues skills and accrues competencies. And if we can measure that better, if we can figure out how to train to that better, then we have an idea of being able to make career ladders to support descriptions of jobs that are stackable in a way that can be useful for empowering the people who are doing it, but also supporting them with all of those other important things like pay and benefits and working environments that can support continued learning and continuing application of good learning.
And Jen, I just want to go and just make the point, it was on the slide, but when we started working on this, we found and used as our starting point, as our kickoff starting point, the CMS competencies that already existed. Can you speak to that a minute, Jen?
Yeah, that's the next slide. Exactly.
Oh, okay.
So this slide is, we use the peer review literature and we identified high quality training materials, and we identified hand-in-hand curriculum as sort of the best, sort of most comprehensive. This hand-in-hand curriculum was developed by CMS to see what the universe of these competencies are. So, and we were focused on direct care workers. So we were focused on that most basic level. And we took the hand-in-hand competencies and we elaborated them in sort of that model that you saw before, the competency set and then the observable skill. And then we organized a think tank of providers and stakeholders that included CNAs, it included nursing home providers, administrators. We included senior living, people who worked in memory care, all of the people, a range of people, I think there was about 40 in that room, who then worked with us the whole day to elaborate those competencies and to make sure that we were capturing each piece of it and that we had all of the sets. So after that day, we developed the sets and we developed the skills statements and we put those together. And then we took those skills and those skill statements back to a group of experts and included people who are living with dementia to react to them and to see if they thought that these were things that were the skills that we needed. And we made a little bit more in terms of revisions. And then we worked with Robert Bowles, who is a person living with Lewy body dementia and also a dementia advocate. And he worked with us to sort of help us finalize these. So it was a process, the creation of it, the application of it, and to pull back to be inclusive of people living with dementia in the process of creating these competencies. So we are pretty confident everything can be improved. There's continuous quality improvement, but we're pretty confident that this is a pretty good representation of the competencies you need and the importance of having this sort of universe of things, a universe of competency sets, is that it can help you figure out, okay, so what we really need to work on is communication. So let's find some really good education about communication and think about these skill statements in relationship to that, train on communication, and then think about testing these competencies. And we weren't able to, in this beginning part, test those competencies, but in later elaborations of what we've been able to do, we've been able to look in and test some of these competencies, and it's been pretty eye-opening and useful. So the components of the guide, there's the topics that should be included, and we'll go over those in a minute, the elements to review in order to identify the best resources, the strategies that support the accrual and application of these skills, and the references from the original sources. So what are the priority topics? They're all in the guide. They're easy to look at, and we're not going to go through each of them because we have more important things to talk to you about today, but they're all in the guide and they're all elaborated in the guide. So understanding dementia, person-centered care, communication, reduction of preventable hospitalization, dining and nutrition, pain management, prevention and reporting of abuse, empowering the person, enriching their lives, and palliative and end-of-life care. So you can see it's a very wide range of competency sets. So I want to just take a minute because we can't do completely didactic webinar. It's hard enough it's hard to do a webinar that's not didactic, but we'd like you to use the chat and help us reflect a little bit on this. So I wanted you to take a minute and I want you to think back to the last time you were in school or in an all-day training if you haven't been in school for a while. And write in the chat, what did that instructor do that really didn't support learning? What happened in that class, that long day that you took that training? What happened in that class that didn't support learning? So there's plenty of you on here today, so I expect some good things in the chats. Whoa, droned on an adult tone, read from her notes. Death by PowerPoint, yes, Joan. Read slides as they're posted. Trying to cover too much information. Yep, lecture. No hands-on application, no activities, no engagement. Exactly. Repeating old information, no interaction with students. Nothing to have me try on for fit. Exactly. How do you experience the learning? Didn't read the room. No time for questions. Yes, I think they've covered most of them for all of us, Amanda. Good. Great. So now I want you to think one more time back to that training, that same training What did that instructor do that really supported your learning? What was it that was wonderful? Now we're already started here. Ruth says, Eden educator training, very interactive. They didn't do any of the things that we described as bad. Good. Storytelling, absolutely. It's human, it's meaningful, right? Definition, example, then apply. Yep. Teach one.
We can't have food on web.
Oh, I wish we could have food. Encourage feedback, ask questions, variety of materials. So you're presenting different ways, right? Conversation, discussion, perfect. Yeah. Applicable, realistic. You all know what good training is. You absolutely all know what good training is.
This is the choir we're talking to, Jen.
We are talking to the choir. Well, this is often happens on Pioneer Network.
I know.
But sometimes if we get you to think a little bit more about it, it's worth it, right? So key training elements for direct care workers. So when we thought about this in the first place, when we developed the guide, we're really trying to orient training for new staff and improving continuing education for incumbent staff, right? So that was really our focus on developing the guide and having that be the process for employers and educators, right? But all of these things are important. And it's not just picking training that's important, but it's fostering supportive learning environments. What we want to do is all of these things, right? We want to continuously give people information that supports language, that supports disseminating person-centered information, helps them get to know their residents, encourages communication and teamwork, interdisciplinarity, and collaboration, right? So talking to each other, having those discussions, sharing those stories, helping people see how it applies to different situations, establishing an involved, caring, and supportive leadership team. That's so key, because if the leadership team doesn't allow, they don't support the direct care workers to do and to act and to empower others, then all that learning is lost. It's not actually worth much. Promoting and encouraging resident, staff, and family relationships that are meaningful in that learning, and evaluating systems and progress. So the thing I love about competency, if you know me already, you know that I'm an evaluator, and I really like that competency can help us understand whether or not what we're teaching is what people are learning, because there's so often that what we're teaching doesn't get all the way through to application. It often gets to knowledge, if we're lucky, but doesn't translate into how they walk the walk when they get to their job. And so we need to consider the basic questions around learning, because learning can only be long lasting if it's a meaningful learning experience. If people have had, like Kim always likes to say, the personal aha moment, because that's when it sticks, right? That's when it transforms you and what you're doing and how you do things. So we really need to consider those basic questions. Where does the learning take place? What are the learners doing when they're learning? How do they receive the experience? What do they need to know? And how can the learners be encouraged to change their behaviors? How can they be supported in their learning? How can you create a learning organization, which you can learn more about later this month from Pioneer Network? So the important part is active learning. We don't do very well with talking heads talking at us. We don't learn very much. We learn it when it goes through our brain. And the way for things to go through our brain is for us to be able to touch or smell or think about or role play or discuss, learn from each other, because these people that you're working with are full of knowledge, and they have lots of opportunity to give you those skills and help you develop as a person. And so peer learning is so important to reinforcing the learning and getting that learning to stick. And so also using a variety of methods, because we're all different kinds of learners. We're all kinesthetic learners. We're all verbal learners. We're all written learners, but all different ways, and things come in different ways. And that's why stories, like we talked about in the chat, are so important, because they're meaningful to us and we can attach them, you know, like you attach a smell memory or you attach a music memory to a time in your life. If the learning is meaningful, if it's a fostering that engagement, then you'll get it in a way that you won't if you're not supported in that moment, as you all talked about in the different things that you didn't like or liked about learning. So how do you motivate and support direct care workers to achieve this active learning? Providing feedback. So you provide feedback in a kind and thoughtful and reasonable way, right? You think about what it is you're going to say in terms of what's positive and what's not working so well, and try to, you know, we usually try to say two things positive to one thing's negative. You know, I really liked what you did there. I could see that you were empathetic, and I could see that you wanted to help Miss Smith, right? And then I noticed that you weren't, the message wasn't getting through to her. What do you think you could do differently? And in that moment, you're allowing them to take some of the ownership, you're empowering them to choose what it is that they want to do, and you're letting them figure out how to do it, right? And in that giving feedback, you're opening it up for them to do more learning, and for them to teach you something, which is also powerful. Rewarding and incentivizing direct care workers. So also this thinking about career ladders and these stackable skills, so that we can reward and incentivize. If you get these skills, then you get this different job, whether this is a named job or an improved job from title or from pay. Providing flexible work, which is also important in terms of thinking through how we learn, and then involving direct care workers. We see over and over and over again in the retention literature, if you're involved in your job, if you're asked for your feedback, if you're on the committee that does the hiring, if you're on the committee that does the quality improvement processes, you're so much more attached to that organization. They value you and they value your input, and it matters to you. And it's just the case with learning. If you are involved in the learning, you learn more. So what are the implications of all of this and doing this right? Well, if we can help people learn, we can help them learn longer and lasting and change maybe their experience. Many direct care workers come into direct care jobs with awful experiences with education, experience with instructors that didn't care about them as a person and didn't value their input. And they have a lot of trauma around that. And so it's your job also to try to level that playing field and to help them to be empowered in the learning and like the learning and enjoy the learning. We have that food always helps, right? Because we're creating a meaningful experience. Increase the active learning, all of those things that we talked about. Focus on the competency attainment, not the tests. Lots of people don't do well on tests, but if you can help them role play and figure it out and discuss it and do it, and then give them good feedback, you get much higher staff engagement. We really want to, the whole point of this is to improve the skills and capacities of the workers to support people living with dementia, all people in person-centered care. And hopefully it results in the empowerment of both the person living with dementia and themselves, and hopefully the families too.
And we know that anything we do across the board to improve quality of care and quality of life for people with dementia, it really results in helping all the residents, all the clients, you know, whoever you're serving. Even if we're focusing on dementia in this, it's applicable across the board for all of the serving.
Absolutely.
So as Jen has already talked about, if the leadership and the management aren't on board and they're not a part of the whole vision of what the education and training plan and path is, then it's not going to be successful. It's not going to work if the support that's needed isn't in place. And we know this. If we can put all the great education we want out there, but if the leadership, management, supervisors, if they're not on board, it's not going to work. And all of you all in the culture change movement know this already as well. It all comes down to the culture of an organization and the organizational culture. And if they don't have the buy-in, and if they're not making the changes necessary to really help the folks be able to implement what they're learning, there are all kinds of barriers to the people with direct care workforce being able to access the learning, apply the learning, and practice the skills that they are achieving and the practices that they're learning about while they're going through this education. And overcoming this can have a huge impact on the learning and motivation of the direct care workers. It's so sad. And you guys, I know you've seen this before. And when people are going through an education, some kind of class, and the direct care workforce gets so excited. And then they go back and nobody in upper management even knows what they're talking about. And that they're wanting to go back and do culture change stuff. And it crushes them because they don't have the support that they need. And they're just totally deflated, and it kills their enthusiasm. And it's almost worse than if they hadn't even learned what they learned, because they don't have the support that they need by everyone. So we just so support and endorse that the leadership and management go through the same training and education as the direct care workforce, the direct care and support associates, not just CNAs, as Jen said, but everyone who's interacting with people with dementia, because everyone together needs to be able to speak the same language and have the same understanding of the philosophy that everybody's working towards, the goals that everybody's working towards. And the senior management needs to be able to really walk the talk and model what the folks are learning. You know, if direct care and support associates are learning something and then they go out into the organization, and let's just say we've taught people not to say demented, and they go out into their organization and all the senior management and their supervisors are using all the wrong language, for example, or they're doing the opposite of what we're trying to teach folks. You know, that's just not going to work. So we need to have everybody being able to celebrate when they're seeing person-centered care and practice and action. And as Jen said, really, you know, call it out. And the culture can come to life when everybody's on the same page and really working together that way. Some other things that, you know, just to emphasize what to focus on, some other topic areas and points are, of course, dementia, including Alzheimer's disease, not just focusing on Alzheimer's, it's the same phrase. It's also important to know and realize and help people understand about mixed dementias. And this is something that we're learning more and more about now, is people don't just have Alzheimer's, they have all different kinds of combinations of things. So that's an important point to help people understand. And it's also in a lot of what's out there, people think that people with dementia are just old. You know, this happens when people are old, and people learn about the slumpers. They see the slumpers. So we have to really undo that perception of dementia. We have to help people understand that it's not a normal part of aging, and not everybody that gets old is going to get dementia. And something that a lot of education doesn't really focus on is the younger onset dementias. And people under 65 can get young onset dementia. And there are a lot of differences in that and how we really focus on that and address that. So that's another important topic for us to remember to focus on. And as we've already talked about, just looking at the education and what we're doing in terms of, is it creating more stigma, and how we are talking about people living with dementia, how what we're talking about is really affecting the people living with dementia and the family members. You're only focused on, you know, the disabilities, what people aren't able to do. You know, y'all have all heard of diagnose and adios, and people are, if they're lucky, get a diagnosis, and then they're like, see you in 6 months. And then the things that people are seeing and learning about are all focused on, you know, the end game, you know, get your affairs in order. It's like I just saw in the chat, people have a great long life to live with dementia if we aren't introducing everything in a way that is creating stigma. And as our friend says, in Australia, we're creating prescribed disengagement. So in everything that we do, we're really needing to make sure that we're not creating stigma, because that keeps people from getting a diagnosis. And one of the best ways that we can do this is by always talking to people living with and learning from them. Our friends who are living with dementia, who are advocates, including them in what we're doing, and listening to them and having them involved, actively involved in what we're doing and creating. And again, as we've already talked about, making sure that we're all moving away from dehumanizing people with dementia in every way that we can. And we have to really look at this whole focus on behaviors and how it's talked about, you know, challenging behaviors, managing behaviors. We need to, as Al Power says, change our thinking about behaviors and dementia, and how we provide education about that and help people understand the right way to approach that, and understand that it's about communication and managing distress, not managing distress, but getting to the root of distress, and that we don't want to have anything that drives a focus on people going to get a prescription for drugs or some kind of restraint. And that's just key in everything we do and how we approach how we're providing education to people. And this whole focus on antipsychotics and drugs you guys, this is just really key. Most of the focus on antipsychotics and the overuse and misuse of antipsychotics is this conversation's really only being had in nursing homes, around the nursing home world, and finding out and thinking about the right ways in whatever realms you guys are in, because I'm sure you all are, you know, your worlds are all touching so many different places. But the more that we can do to try and integrate this kind of thinking into everything that we're doing across the board is just key. And we have to all keep trying to work on that.
Hey, Kim.
Yeah.
There's a question in the chat from Gabriel. When residents with dementia ask questions about people from the past who have passed or are not around anymore, how do we handle this situation? I just thought maybe you wanted to deal with that one.
Well, really, so much of this comes down to having a deep knowing of each person, because every person with dementia is unique. Everybody's different. And something we haven't even talked about, we don't even have any kind of slide on this, but is staging. You know, anything that we do to put people into blocks, and, you know, the staging models where we just, if the way we teach those, the way we present these to people, we have to be so careful that we're not teaching people to just assign people into slots and boxes. And the same comes from that question that you just asked. It really depends on the person and what the situation is, and us having a deep knowing of each person. Our friend Richard Taylor, who so many of you guys know from the past, he was an amazing man and soul who had, he was diagnosed with dementia, probably of the Alzheimer's type, and he was a psychologist, and he really became the first person living with dementia who was an advocate, who kind of started a lot of the stand up and speak out about what it feels like to live with dementia. And he really said, he taught me and so many of us that it's best, we don't want to teach people to lie right up front. We don't want to start with a lie, because we never know when people living with dementia are going to be in the moment and be with us. We want to see the truth and see where it goes. And it, again, depends on the person. If somebody's spouse dies, for example, and they're asking, where's my person? If you never, ever tell them and give them a chance, then be really damaging. But if it creates over and over ongoing pain and trauma, then that gives you your answer. So that could be a whole like 2-day conversation, but it comes down to knowing each person deeply and trying to put together opportunities and time in how you do what you do, where you can really get to know people. There you go. Okay, so trying to figure out, all of us, how we can try and get people to know and learn about the antipsychotic use, overuse, and even educating families, people with dementia, about this stuff up front, so that we all don't just think that if anybody has any kind of behavior that we need to go in and need a medicine for that. So that's an important piece. And Kim says, understanding functional characteristics of the cognitive, let's see, the chat box closed. Understanding the characteristics and levels and stages is best practice, yes, but we have to make sure we don't just put people in those boxes, because people, for example, people with Lewy body dementia and some of the other dementias have varying levels of cognition. And sometimes they can be with you and understand at some points, and then not at others. So it's complicated. That one's a complicated one. So it really all comes down to the different viewpoints, the two different ways of looking at dementia. Are we looking at it from the biomedical or traditional institutional model, or the experiential person-centered, person-directed care model, which is what we call culture change? And in terms of thinking about the types of dementia education and training, and I hate the word training because you train a dog, but that's what people call it. In terms of the different ways to think about it is really, and when you're trying to look at how to choose education, is it coming from a medical model? Is it only focused on, we have to know about the medical and the clinical, but is it only focused on that? Is it only focused on those things? Or is it coming from the person-centered, person-directed culture change viewpoint? And really, it comes down to person-centered care and having a focus on the whole person, the complete person, their well-being. And the education and the training that we need to be looking for, and what we're trying to put in place in our organizations, needs to have a person-centered philosophy as the baseline, as the foundation for all of the education that we're putting into place and that we're trying to find as we're looking for the right education as we go forward. Okay. I haven't been able to keep up with the whole chat yet. Jen, is there anything else missed? I'll look at that while Joan's talking, and then if we have time, we can have some questions. Now, in terms of other kinds of resources that we wanted to share with you guys is with the Culture Change Network of Georgia, we we're in our second C&P grant and civil monetary penalty grant with CMS. And through these grants, we've been able to create a library of really short micro-learning, quick little videos about the culture change movement, basically, and lots of other things that fit into the world that we're talking about. And they live on our Facebook page and our YouTube page. And these might hopefully be some resources that will be helpful for you. On our YouTube page, there's a tab that's called Playlists, where the videos are divided up into themed playlists so that you can look at them kind of in order, in a way that they flow into each other. And we have a whole series on dementia, including Alzheimer's. And again, most of them are short, but hopefully these could be a resource to help you all. And we have a resource on the basics of culture change. What is person-centered care? The difference between the medical model and medical institutional model and person-centered, person-directed care model. And, you know, things that help explain what culture change and person-centered care is. And Joan just is saying we're providing a handout to you, a link to a handout that includes all of this stuff and how to get to it. And for the dementia videos, we have a separate handout that includes like a hot link to those directly. Let's see. We have a whole series, language and words matter, including 2 specifically about dementia. We even have one focused on hospitalization for people with dementia and how we need to really be cautious and pay attention to that. So you can also, if you sign up for our newsletter, stay in touch with things that we're doing as we update these. Our grant that we're working on right now is including a lot of person-centered dementia care work. So we'll be releasing new videos throughout the next few years. These are just little short, they're not fancy, but hopefully they'll be helpful. So there you go. And again, as we've said, we'll be sending you the competency guide and handouts for the videos. And we just all want to, as do we all want to work together to try and improve the quality of life for everybody whose life is touched by dementia. Ms. Joan?
Well, oh my goodness. That was incredible. And there may be more here. So let me go ahead and finish up a couple things that I wanted to share. And then we'll hopefully have some time and we can talk to Kim and Jennifer, because this truly does kind of fit in with what we're talking about here today. First off, Kim and Jennifer, oh my gosh, thank you so very much. And as we've been saying, you're going to get a recording of this. You're going to get a link to handouts, a certificate of attendance. And for those who requested nursing home administrator hours, you will get a certificate for that as well for the 1 contact hour. And again, if you came in late, if you did not put in the registration your information, your NAB number, your state, your name would be nice. Send it to me, send it through my email. And I think Kathy will pop my email address in the chat so you'll have it. But you get bombarded with emails from me probably. So my guess is most of you can find it. But I do want to share some other things that are coming up that really go along with this. There's a podcast right now that is on creating a learning organization, because really what Kim and Jennifer talked about so much, it is about being a learning organization. It's not just about training as an isolated thing. It has to be a part of your culture. And this conversation that's on the podcast and that's going to be taking place further on Thursday, May 19th at 2:00 is with some people that many of you know that are just outstanding educators in the space that we all work in, the passion that we all have for person-directed care. Anna Ortegaro, which I see her name is misspelled, so my apologies to Anna, who has just been with us for so many years, a former member of Pioneer Network's board, who's just an incredible educator. Marla DeVries with the Greenhouse Project, Jackie and Tim, who I know are on this call right now with Park Springs, Carrie Chasano, and I see, oh my gosh, I am in such trouble. Her name is misspelled as well, who is with Presbyterian Homes. I hope she's not on. John Hobby, who is with the CARES program. They have a wonderful breadth of knowledge that they're going to share, and just an opportunity to talk and explore what it means to be that learning organization and why it's so important to all of us right now. So check that out. It's on our website. Just go to the events page of the Pioneer Network website. And then the next thing I wanted to share is there's another training coming up. If you can pop the next slide for me, Kim. This is the next webinar we have planned. And it's on May 25th. And it's a conversation between Penny Cook, our president and CEO here at Pioneer Network, and Rob Simonetti, who is a phenomenal man. He is an architect, president of SAGE, which is, for those who don't know, I wrote it down so I'd say it right, the Society for the Advancement of Gerontological Environments, because we know environment is important, but we know environment without culture, just like education without culture being a part of it, we're missing something. So this is going to be a wonderful conversation to hear and see them both. So we'll put the link to that, the registration for that as well on the site. And then the last slide, this is I'm so excited about. Kim and Jennifer are going to be with us, as well as several other people that I have mentioned today. And we are going to be back live again. And there is nothing that beats live education. Zoom is great, but boy, we're ready for something more. So if you want to meet Jennifer and Kim, they're going to be doing another session for us at the conference. It is using a trauma-informed approach to unravel our collective trauma from COVID, along with their peer, Dr. Leanne Royster. So that promises to be phenomenal. On the topic of learning and development, as I mentioned, we've got the group Anna and that team are actually doing 4 different sessions throughout the conference that really are about helping you become a learning organization, and wonderful sessions. But our educators often get left out when we talk about who's going to go to a conference, and we don't think to send the educator, but this would be a wonderful opportunity for the educators and communities to come and get their cup filled so that they're prepared to come home and do the same for others. And then we do have a pre-conference workshop, the Alzheimer's Disease and Dementia Care Seminar, which is actually the webinar that is the seminar, the workshop that's required in order to gain your Certified Dementia Practitioner certificate. And this is being taught by Carrie Chisano. And I think it reinforces all of the training that is part of Pioneer Network's conference, reinforces what Jennifer and Kim have talked about. The content is so very critical, but the delivery and the way it is integrated into the culture is so important. And that's the thing that we are so very proud of at Pioneer Network, is we have a phenomenal group of guides for all of our sessions. Where do you see them? I mean, choosing the right one is going to be the biggest challenge, who truly, they don't just teach you the facts. They teach with a passion, and they teach with a level of engagement and involvement that is just unique to the wonderful people that, I don't know about you, but the wonderful people I've had an opportunity to collaborate with and work with and share with through the space that is Pioneer Network and the Greenhouse Project team and the Eden team and the Action Pack team and all the folks that are out there doing things on their own as well, but who believe so passionately in the work that we're doing. So, what you have shared with us today, Jennifer and Kim, is so very valuable. And I'd like to just ask you if you have any final thoughts that you would like to leave us all with, or if anybody has a final question that you would like to share. And we'll check out that link for you, Jackie. I'm kind of half looking there. My ADD is kicking in here, sorry. So Jennifer and Kim, I'm going to turn it back to you for a minute.
Jen, you go first.
Oh, I mean, I think it's just if you're with Kim enough, you realize that it's all about culture. But I think that fostering supportive learning environments is really the key, is the supporting people to be the best persons that they can be, and then they're able to help other people to be in the best situation that they can be in. And so it has to be person-centered all around.
Having a person-centered philosophy and letting that be the foundation and the root of everything you do, and letting it guide what you're building in your organization is just key. Because no matter what education you pick, if you don't have that person-centered, person-directed, relationship-based philosophy as the underlying groundwork of what you're doing, it's not, and the support of leadership, management, you know, the leadership has to have the right plan, or it's not going to take, as they say. Yep. So we know that also, I just want to say, in the guide, it doesn't list every single thing, but it gives a really good starting point. And the point I was making earlier, Jen, was that when we started with the CMS competencies, my point being was those were the ones that had already been put in place by CMS for direct care workers, for the direct care staff in general. And then our work with the task force that we did and the think tank, and was to expound, if the direct care workforce is learning how to give baths and do these things, then what does all that basic stuff that they're learning? So what does that mean if somebody's living with dementia? You know, I remember back when I first got involved with the culture change movement, people weren't thinking about dementia differently. It was like, well, if we're learning about this, then it applies to everybody. Well, there are special things we need to learn about how it works with dementia. So anyway, I just wanted to clarify that point. And I wish I could see everybody. I can't wait to see y'all in person and hug you.
Absolutely. Well, and be careful, because Kim gives some powerful hugs. So, but we're looking forward to them because we have missed them so much. I apologize for the issue with the one link for the SAGE webinar, and we will be sure we get that corrected. And as I posted in the chat, it will be included in the well, it will be included in the email that you all get. So look it up. And if you just go to the events page, eventually it will get working. I apologize. We've had a few technical difficulties with the website the last 24 hours, but we got a great person working on fixing it for us. So thank you all for being here today. Jennifer, Kim, as always, you just share so much with us, and you give us so much to think about. And to take back to our teams. We look forward to seeing you in Denver, and we hope many of you can join us there as well. And if not in Denver, we hope to see you here on chat, here on whatever this is, Zoom that we're on. So thank you for sharing your time with us. As we said, it's very precious, and we wish everyone a wonderful day.
Thanks, everybody. Kiss, kiss.